As we march towards the halfway point, some teams are still struggling to find their stride. That will be Sem9, currently looking for their first win. On the other hand, we have Frank Esports striving for that 500 mark and getting even. I'm going to be your play-by-play today, Clement 2, and before we go even further, we are going to be going through our sponsors, CTBC and Caliber. Thank you so much for making all of the PCS possible. Now on to our color. It's going to be Frank, not from Frank Esports, but Frank Nightstar. So I always want to ask you about Frank Esports when I'm casting with you, because you do seem to come from the same organization, or you at least have some affinity with the team, correct?
I mean, like, I'm sure all the Edwards out there that are a fan of League of Legends, they were definitely rooting for EDG when they went to Worlds. And as such, I just have to root for Frank Esports. Even if they don't perhaps have a feasible chance at making Worlds, I still have to, I still have to hope for it. Come on, man. Like, we're going to MSI, we're going to Worlds, we're winning Worlds. Absolutely.
Yeah, you were seeing a very different tune when at the start of this broadcast, but we have seen some great improvements from Frank Esports, honestly. Kurt had a great game on the Gwen against Taco, getting 6 kills there, just dominating his lane, which is something we haven't seen before.
Yeah, and it helps that the matchup assisted him, and perhaps a couple of misplays coming in from Taco when it came to that top side, but for sure Kurt had his best performance of the split. And all in all, like, Rebirth, he came into the roster, we weren't super sure about his performance the first time around he was in, but yesterday it looked a lot better. So hopefully he's able to build on that momentum, and I think perhaps going forward that Rebirth is the one to take the reins of the support role rather than K2. I'm not sure what the dynamic is between the two and how it changes, at least so far, because we just haven't seen enough of Rebirth, but I think perhaps that is Frank Esports' plan when it comes to dealing with that bot lane situation.
On the flip side, we have Sem9 coming in, Shiromine, Caspiel over Arashi today, Lazar in the mid lane, ClayX and Felia in the bottom side. Currently, this team is still winless, sitting at 0-8, but we have seen slow, gradual improvements. I feel like the early game hasn't been as completely disastrous. It's still very tough, for sure, and their champion pools are a little bit unorthodox, as we see here from ClayX, favoring that Jhin almost over most of the traditional tier lists of Zeri, Jinx, and Nephelios.
Yeah, and I think this is because of how much that Sem9 have had to play around mid lane, whether they like it or not. It has always been a question of Lazar, can he hold up in the 1v1? More often than times, it's not. And because of that, they've had to pull support help, they've had to pull jungle assistance in order to keep him afloat. And because of that, you don't want one of these larger hyper carry champions in that bot lane who is really easily exposed. So that's why he's been put on a more utility role. We've even seen the lethality Xayah come out for him, and that's just because he's put in a spot where he doesn't get to play the hyper carry champions, because their playstyle is defined by how well Lazar does in the lane phase.
Yeah, Lazar has been going for go fast or go home. LeBlanc coming out, Zoe coming out, Syndra coming out. Sem9 plays a, I would say, completely different meta from everyone else in the PCS. They are our quintessential tempo compositions. I look, it'll be a stretch to say that they've been successful with this comp, but this is definitely what they have drafted for themselves. So ClayX, has to kind of roll with the team, and he's not really going to play many of those hyper carries. Going into the draft phase, we have your usual suspects in Renekton and Zeri on the red side, while Frank Esports has shown some respect for Caspiel's Jarvan. That has been a great engage tool so far in these 2 games he's played.
And Caspiel, the differences between Caspiel and Arashi since Caspiel has come into the roster have really been defined about how much you play around that mid lane. Arashi really took to, hey, if they gank you in the mid lane, I'll just go ahead, invade the jungle, and try and get things for myself. However, on the flip side, for Caspiel, it's been, all right, if they are looking to attack you, don't worry. I will spend 2 camps of resources to make sure you are okay in this lane. However, when it comes to this early phase of draft, it is going to be Kurt locking in the Gwen, and for the side of some 9, they'll take that Jinx pick because of the fact, well, it's been a karma ban by Sem9. They really don't want to see Kurt on this karma pick for some reason, because it was such a disastrous karma game.
It was. It's interesting to see the karma banned out. Perhaps they have other ideas, maybe knowing Rebirth potentially playing that one. Enchanter supports are still a thing. Even though it has been mainly Nautilus in the PCS for some reason. On the flip side, Frank Esports is going to go for Holo's, one of his favorite champions, the Hecarim coming in here. He has been pretty much just Xin Zhao, Hecarim spanning, and the Aphelios going down here as well. For Sem9, I will say this is looking like probably their most standard draft of the season just yet, and I have to say I welcome standard. If you're not able to win with the tempo team comp early, then why not try for something that has a bit more of a chance in the late game?
Yeah, for the side of Frank Esports, I fully expect the bans of Orianna and Syndra to come out, unless if they want to hope for the Syndra falls into their hands. But you really just want to heavy target this mid lane pool, and I think it goes for both sides here. For Sem9, they're looking at the Veigar pick, they're looking at the Victor pick here to target out. And for Frank Esports, it does look like they want to turn their attention onto the support pool instead. So maybe we get to see a Nautilus ban, because if you leave Nautilus here, like for sure Sem9, they were never looking at the Tahm Kench. They were looking at the Nautilus first, because that's just a priority here in PCS.
It does feel like Frank are perhaps contemplating on just full dive. It seems, I totally agree with you, it seems really weird to ban out the Tahm and leave kind of the Nautilus up, unless you're trying to go for like a full engage. But they actually take away Lazar's LeBlanc, so doesn't want to face that 1-2 punch of Xin Zhao and LeBlanc in the mid lane. Sem9 are going to be the ones locking in the Orianna, just as you predicted. Very good call there. Just such a powerful pick in this meta right now, and Frank Esports now have to. Oh, go ahead.
And the big thing here is Lazar has already played 4 games of Orianna. He's not looked particularly well, but Orianna can very easily just be a composition pick. You don't have to perform insanely well if you're able to just play up against a full dive comp where I essentially dub it the Unga Bunga composition, because you're going to easily hit 3-4 man shockwaves every single time. Frank Esports, it feels like they're looking to really quadra double down here for this comp. As okay, it's definitely not the Ivern, even though Ivern mid would be pretty comical. It will be the Kali mid, knowing that, hey, Lazar's not exactly going to hard punish this matchup. Let's get Pretender, yet another big carry champion. And while we haven't seen him impact the early and maybe parts of the mid game as hard, he does play a lot of these champions that do scale up and provide a later game threat.
We have seen the Veigar for him, the Victor for him, so scaling does seem to be the way of the Pretender. In the meantime, we are going to get a Braum rounding out the draft from Sem9, setting the stage for offense versus defense. We've seen so many good Orianna shockwaves going up against dive comps. It really takes the skill out of skill shot. So, you know, if we're not looking at the IDs or like the track record so far, who do you think won the draft here?
I think when you come to a lot of these PCS teams and you identify these as the drafts, a lot of them will be a lot more comfortable with the Frank Esports draft, because it's a lot of aggression that you can facilitate here. However, when it comes to these particular 2 teams, both of these teams have played really slow when it comes to their approach to the game. And I think when it comes, if you look at it in that respect, the lower risk composition feels like it should come out ahead, and that would be the side of Sem9 in that case.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. We haven't really seen Frank Esports try to play in a snowbally fashion,
Mhm.
especially with this type of a team comp. They're much more used to just stalling and kind of placing crowd control for M&M to carry them. So it's trying something different against Sem9. And to be honest, we have seen a lot of teams kind of pull out their B or C strategies against Sem9 to try to practice this on the PCS stage. We'll find out if Frank Esports can make a good impression with this one. I would say that this is much more of a Beyond Gaming or a Meta Falcon composition coming out from them. We'll see if they can pilot it. On the other hand, for Sem9, once again, they don't want to go home winless in the first round. They're hunting for that one. I think this is the best draft that they had probably for the entire season. You know, it's very defined. It has its carries. And like you said, they are going up against an opponent that will allow them to scale.
Yeah, and that will be the name of the game going into this early game, is how does Hollow play the early game on this Hecarim? You know he has Ghost, so he has the ability. Again, it's very similar to that Lee Sin matchup. You're going to farm faster than the Xin, and you can still have relatively good impact on these lanes if you want to gank with the Ghost. So it also plays similarly to the Jarvan, right? You get an early gank, burn their flash, then you come back around at level 6 with your ultimate, and it almost guarantees the kill in that regard. So all eyes on Hollow, and for Sem9, it's kind of the same old story. All eyes on their jungler and be able to put out fires to make sure these scaling carries can hit those scaling breakpoints.
Yeah, very different approach from both teams this time around. I can't wait to see what they're going to bring onto the table. But, you know, going through this in the procedural way that you have so far, it has been a big question for Sem9. The laning phase has been very difficult. We just saw it in the stats. You know, bot lane Clayx, on average, down 1,500 gold at 15. So it's going to put a lot of stress onto Caspiel to hopefully hold the hands of his laners, make sure they can make it through, and then smash the opponent with this defensive sort of composition. We're going to head on to the Rift. This is the third game of the day. We're only playing 4 today. It will be very exciting to see if Sem9 can finally get themselves onto the standings.
Yeah, and we already saw CFO did take their first loss, so perhaps that bodes well in that regard for Sem9 fans here, as Frank Esports looking to get to 4 and 5. That would be a big boost in their ability to try and crack the top half of the standings, as it's still a very, very difficult task for that top 5, but it would also create a lot of separation between them and the rest of that bottom half of the league.
Really interesting in the runes coming up here. To follow up on your point, exactly, you know, you talked about this just being a top 5 heavy league, and Frank Esports are just sitting on the doorstep there. They're very close to it. They still have MFD and Impunity nipping at their tails, but with this win, they could definitely propel themselves into a much better position. I do want to take a look at the summoners being selected here. We saw an earlier Ghost and Inferno, and Ignite coming out in the Gwen versus Tryndamere matchup, but a very different setup here from Kerr. What is he looking forward to with the TP and Exhaust here?
He's really just looking to have a combat summoner, but also one that scales well too, right? The Ignite is usually the other choice when it comes to finding a combat summoner and that teleport. But in this case, I like this choice from Kurt, and we've seen that he does make very good strategic decisions when it comes to rune choices, when it comes to summoner spell selection, and when it comes to some of these draft picks as well. But it's been the execution that's come short. And in this game, you know, there's a lot of scaling carries for Sem9. So if you're able to get onto the back line and completely shut one down and kill the other, it really takes the legs out from Sem9 in these team fights.
See if he's going to be able to make that one work out on the side of Kurt. As we mentioned, he has played a lot of different champions, even got his Karma band out, which is kind of interesting. And he's doing quite well in the early game. So far, Caspiel has not shown up on the map just yet. He's still going for his first clear in his red buff. Caspiel is a player that I absolutely adore on Xin Zhao. I've seen him play in 2018 in Singapore, and when he was still on the Kuala Lumpur Hunters, and his Tryndamere, his Xin Zhao was a thing of beauty. He was diving in all the way. It was no stops. He was building Triforces and making life absolute hell for his opponents. Definitely one of the most aggressive Xin Zhaos that we've seen, and this is a champion that he's actually built a reputation on, so we'll see if he can get something here as he dodges out of the Scryer's Bloom. Is still going to get spotted in the end, but some nifty footwork there, and we do have Hollow just giving over the Scuttle, even though he has a level lead.
Yeah, and it should be a double Scuttle in that regard if they really want it, although Caspiel could get found out here and maybe cut off here by Hollow, but he will hit level 4. So I think that's going to prompt Hollow to go ahead, back off in that instance. And I was going to say it will be a double Scuttle secured for Caspiel, but it will be his bot lane that are going to be able to secure that one. And now Hollow making a just little wave hello into this mid lane as Pretender. He's actually gone for the Dorn Shield instead of what we saw in our earlier game, of course, with the triple Juju beads, as you call them. But okay, trade up into the top side. It will be okay. Match
is going in, but Kurt is getting those stacks up and dealing a lot of damage. Meanwhile, Lazar pushing in Pretender. This is the best laning phase so far we have seen from 7-9, and a team-wide effort as well. We could see our observers just panning across Holo and figuring out all of his camps has been taken. So far, so good for 7-9, even though it looks like it will swing back into Kurt's favor after that trade.
Yeah, able to hold up during the first 5 minutes at the very least for 7-9. They also haven't had to pull their support for an early roam into that mid lane, which is great. That's usually where things have gone south for Clay X in a lot of these games, because he is losing his support early on, looking to accommodate his mid lane, spend 30 seconds to a minute hanging around mid, make sure it's okay, and as a result he has to take those next 1 or 2 waves off. Essentially he's forced to take time off out of his lane, and as a result he'll usually suffer quite a bit. But this time around, it's just going to be a bit of a stroll into the mid lane for his support, and then it should just be Braum coming quickly down back bot.
Extremely aggressive play from Caspiel, trying to find out the position of Holo. He spots him at half HP. Holo will pop back to full after the smite, but the fight is on. This will be a 3v3
level
back
6
and
on
forth.
Lazar.
Holo dodges out on the wind, becomes lightning, goes back in,
3v2.
and Kurt is coming in with the needlework. Can they find the first kill? No, first blood over to Lazar and 7-9. A great shockwave.
Good shockwave
onto 2. But the fight is swinging back into the favor. Pretender still looking for that execute. Not going to find it. Kurt jumps over the wall. Can Lazar get out? Pretender flashes in to find the kill. Sure, am I going to pick up another? Meanwhile, in the bot lane, we have action all across the board. Play X is going to stay alive, but he has to be very careful about those Infernums.
He's going to lose.
Heal is getting used. They're running away from this one. They will get zoned out, but with their lives intact.
We get zoned off, and they will end up losing all those minions. And for the most part, like, immediately when that jungle skirmish happened, that was when Eminem and Rebirth just went in, but it looks like they could look for a turn here. Caspiel's here, but Hollow's quickly behind.
Caspiel has to find his way back to the dual lane. Can he find the kill before this goes through? Caspiel will get the kill. Felia jumps out, and a 1-for-1 trade. Jungle for support here. A pretty even trade. We will take another look at the top lane mechanics here as the 3v3 evolves.
Yeah, and Lazar's here faster, but because of, I feel like, how overly patient he is with this ultimate, while he hits a nice 2-man ultimate here, the kill could have come down onto Hollow that much faster, and the amount of damage he was able to output, I feel like that made this fight a lot closer than what it should have, and it ends up being a 2-for-2 trade, which is, I think, really just the best opportunity here.
Oh, Lazar dodges out on the ultimate, but
Easy
still gonna
tech.
get pushed in. He's nowhere to go here. Gets a 3-man shockwave, but it's only for looks. He does go down, and I think Pretender is very happy with this game. You know, in terms of the gold trade,
Yep.
Sem9 actually won out on the skirmish, but because of the kill distribution, it's very hard to say that that was actually a net positive for them.
Yeah, it does make this mid game very, very threatening because of how far ahead Pretender is on this Akali pick now. And even more importantly, Lazar doesn't have his flash. So that will be a key summoner, of course, to keep track of approaching this mountain dragon. Of course, he'll have the summoner back up before the dragon spawns, but at the same time, you can certainly imagine Frank Esports really take full advantage of this summoner difference to try and turn that 2 deaths to maybe 3 or 4.
Taking a look at the bottom lane in the meantime, Eminem, they do have the level 6 advantage, and just looking for that chance to go in. Doesn't seem like they're going to find it, as Sem9's bot lane is finally going to tick over to level 6, at least onto Clay X Rebirth, trying to get an angle, does find Felia. Moonlight Vigil goes down, but not enough damage just yet to finish him off, and Sem9 will take this opportunity to go onto Herald. They are spotted. Holo coming in, trying to get the smite down. It will come down to a smite fight. Doesn't matter for the smite necessarily, but Holo will find the steal. Very well done, and now Kurt trying to get the needlework, finds it onto 2. With the chase down, Caspiel has nowhere to go. Pretender goes in with those 3 kills. Caspiel already down. They do find Holo, but it doesn't matter. The real threat is onto Pretender. Shiro Man gonna get the Gwen as well. Double kill. So it will be a 1 for 2. Can Lazar get that shutdown? He's hunting for it. He's willing to take tower shots, but it's not enough damage. Pretender saves his life and keeps that 300 gold bounty away from the enemy.
It almost looked like there was perhaps an opportunity for Pretender to just turn that kill as Lazar tanked that tower, but he decides not to take the opportunity, instead protecting his bounty, which I think makes a lot of sense in that regard. But we get to see the replay on this, as this time around, this Lazar 3-man shockwave does have impact. And I mean, Shiromine just goes to town. This is what Tryndamere does. And you pop that Undying Rage, there's just no response to the crit damage that's going to come out from that giant sword.
Great sustained damage being dealt right there, and Gwen really didn't have much recourse with the needlework used to engage. We're gonna watch Frank Esports just push down this tower. Not a lot that Sem9 could do, but they have a 3-man in position.
On Sem9's bot lane.
Ooh, yeah, this is gonna get pretty risky.
Lazar's coming though.
Lazar doesn't make it all the way, and now he might find it a little bit difficult, as we have Frank Esports sending a 4-man potentially into the mid lane. Let's see if Pretender is going to go aggressive here. Does get tagged.
They're going to try and force the flash out again.
Oh, it's such a difficult position for him. Holo into the back with Decimating Smash. The flash does succeed, and Shockwave keeps him alive for just a while longer. He dodges out on the snip and keeps himself alive. Well done.
Ooh, Rocket also goes wide, so unfortunately ClayX unable to cash in on a low health Hecarim, but Shiromine once again starts going to town, does Tryndamere things, and this is why PCS Tryndamere has been so frightening.
Shiromine with his dancing shoes bought a lot of time for the rest of his team, and now they find themselves against Frank Esports that have to reset. That's 2 members off of the map, while Sem9 are congregating onto the top side.
That was a good read.
Holo's gonna get spotted out, and this time there is no smite to save him. Caspiel falls up. Oh, gets the smite back and will survive with the extra HP, but how will Kurt get out of this? No exhaust, Wave getting shoved in here. He's gonna have to outplay very hard here in this 4v1. Thoughts and prayers for Kurt, but can he make it out of this? Hollowness is gonna buy a lot of time, does get stunned up. He falls down, Pretender in to try and pick off the kills. Oh, they will find the hook! Rebirth with the plays! And that's gonna be a very fed Akali as he goes up to 4 kills.
Oh my lord. If you're looking for a carry performance from Pretender, this has to be it here. 4 kills already tossed into his hands on the Akali. He has a CS advantage. He has the Proto Belt already completed. Now Eminem looking to 1v1.
Ooh, PlayX, that's not the turn you want to make. Flashes, heals, and stays alive. Last auto attack would have sealed the deal, but he gets to walk out.
Yeah, really nicely done from both AD carries in that play. Eminem taking the aggressive stance, being able to make the play first off, but also ClayX being able to survive. And it feels like that's what we always highlight on ClayX and his ability to try and survive really dicey situations, because he's always put into them due to the nature of his team trying to make plays elsewhere.
Yeah, that was so incredibly lucky.
Oh, now we get to see the replay. That hook, boom! Disgusting.
Beautiful stuff, just coming over the wall, no hesitation. Uses, I believe that was his real flash to get over there, but well done. And they know the name of the game from Frank Esports. We were questioning if they actually knew how to play more of a 1-3-1 composition, but I definitely think they understand the key factor here. It's just to get Pretender fed, so he can dominate those side lanes, especially against someone like Lazar.
Yeah. So far, it's paying off well, and you can also see the bot lane is also naturally ahead here. Eminem having a 20 CS advantage over PlayX. Of course, it helps that they were able to constantly zone them off of minion waves. And now we're going to see if they're able to snowball this gold advantage. So far, it's 2.5k gold, but can they close the deal? Can they find that big fight around third dragon, which is going to be really what this game is going to come down to?
Feels like a battle between two backline killers in Shiromine and Kurt here. Kurt is going to have to leave his tower alone. No help on the way. Meanwhile, Frank trying to look for an equalizing play onto the top side. Doesn't look like they're going to find it just yet, and Sem9 are going to come ahead quite heavily in this play. Good block by Felia. Rebirth throws out the hook. Moonlight Vigil goes down, and unfortunately for Felia, he's not taking enough to survive this. PlayX actually goes forward, nearly gets the play to work, and finds it with the last auto attack. Well done on the bait. Caspiel going in. Eminem finds the double kill, surprisingly. But still gives up his life for it. We have a game here. Sem9 is looking at... they're just looking so much more alive than the previous 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we talked about if the game ever slows down, Sem9 have the ability to try and make some of these plays, and they also have the composition to their advantage, right? We talked about if this ends up being a slow game, they have Jinx, they have Orianna, they have Tryndamere, and I mean, their peel tools are solid in the Braum pick along with the Xin, of course. In this situation, it was a really nice pick coming in and really nice play from Rebirth and Eminem. Rebirth constantly tanking tower, but unfortunately he tanks one too much that gets him low enough to allow for that first reset to come through. At the very least, Eminem able to trade out 1-for-1. He knows he doesn't have summoners, so that's really the best option he has in that moment, and he's able to cash out on that in that regard. Now, Sem9, like, when they get to play call around Caspiel, I feel like Caspiel kind of micromanages them, like, hey, I need you here, I need you here. Then it feels like a slow game benefits them even more, right? Because then you don't get into these hectic situations where players have to decide for themselves. You can always allow then for your jungler to direct traffic.
We do have Caspiel as kind of the veteran member of this team. Has been playing for a very long time. Well-known name in his home country. And we see him on the map leading the charge around with the Orianna ball onto him. So very explosive and decisive team fights coming out from Sem9. There was a bit of a scuffle that we saw on the Herald. Shiromine did have to burn his Undying Rage, but does get out of it. And after the reset, I believe we're going to have another big fight here. It doesn't seem like Frank Esports are going to be able to walk away from this one completely unscathed. Maybe I'm wrong. Despite all the vision there, Sem9 off the reset. are going to decide to go for the Drake instead of contesting this one.
Yeah, if I am the side of some 9, I am very willing to go ahead trade this third dragon for that Herald, because if you do concede this next dragon, it makes your next fight even more forced, where all of a sudden Frank Esports have really all the options available to them. When that 4th dragon will spawn, if they have the first 3, they can go ahead, trade it out for Baron buff, which is still a big win, especially for a tempo comp. You want that Baron buff to try and end the game, but some 9, they're setting up a death push. We'll see if anyone's actually interested in coming to die.
Well, there's a lot of people interested, but I don't think they're coming to die. They're coming to envelop Sem9. Sem9 actually backs out of that one before any of the crowd control can go down, and a big fight is brewing for this third Drake. It will be an Ocean Soul going down. Very valuable for both of these teams here. And this is going to be the first pitch battle that we have in the entire game. No more skirmishes, straight onto the 5v5. Lazar will get spotted out on the banana brush here, but Caspel has that Orianna ball, and he's going directly in onto Holo. Holo dodges out onto the slow, and in goes Rebirth into the backline, gets a triple with the ultimate. Pretender still trying to find an angle. Meanwhile, Caspel getting pretty low, and now Frank Esports do control the river. Well played by Rebirth.
Really slow fight, and it ends up being Frank Esports able to utilize their composition just a little bit better, knowing that there was Pretender just waiting to come in on the backside of that fight. Sem9 go forward, trying to find the engage, but unfortunately the side of Frank Esports play it correctly. They play slow, they go ahead, immediately back off, and all of a sudden Sem9 are like, well, if we commit and go a little bit too far forward, then Pretender just eats up our backline so easily. So that's why they go ahead, back off, and allow Frank Esports to snag their third dragon. So even though Sem9 spent a lot of time trying to set up for a safe dragon take, it ends up being Frank Esports that get the Rift Herald and the third dragon.
No losses whatsoever. Just so well done. You could tell that Sem9 were trying to push things before the flank came in and Pretender was in position. But Frank, they read that correctly. They dangled the tankiest member right in front of Sem9. So Caspiel, he was like, well, I gotta go now, or Akali's coming in, and that target's just not killable for them. Turbo Chem tank gets some move speed, dodges around the abilities. Just beautiful stuff from Frank. I'm really impressed by how they've been handling this team fight so far. You know, they're a 3-5 team, but they're definitely showing up to play and showcasing that they have a lot of these more advanced team fight positionings down very well.
Yeah, and this was the thing about Frank Esports. When we saw this roster come out and with like, hey, they have Pretender coming in from the PSG, they have Eminem. Like, okay,
Eminem
just
going
kidding.
for the straight burst. That didn't really work out. The Caspiel is next on the menu. Pops his Crescent Guard, and they still find the needlework onto ClayX. That was so unfortunate into the back line. Caspiel survives, but his AD carry takes one step too far forward.
A nice little pick there coming in from Frank Esports, and right now the dive is just very, very threatening, and they're really playing well around that dive pressure at the moment, and they're third on Rift Herald. It should be 2 towers, and no health loss on Shelly, which will guarantee this second charge. And we'll see what the defense is coming in from Sem9. Do they go in?
Second tower down, and Sem9 are running away as their opponents have the numbers advantage. Meanwhile, Pretender getting in onto Shiromine. They both have 4 kills at this point. Undying Rage already used. Pretender trying to kite this one out and go back in. Oh, that was such a beautiful outplay from Pretender. Keeps 60% of his HP and even flashes the emote.
Yeah, just a lot of patience coming in from Pretender on the Akali. He knows that he has the matchup advantage against Tryndamere. As long as he stays mindful of his cooldowns, Shiromine is going to be forced to expend the Tryndamere ultimate prematurely because of how much burst damage can be possible from a pick like Akali that is so far ahead. And we get to see the replay here. Pretender just has a nice angle, even though 2 levels down, mind you.
Yeah.
But, you know, playing it very well, spaces well. Of course, the vision denial offered by Shroud makes it really hard for a Tryndamere to play through as well, because you need an auto to get your damage out, and the vision denial is the best way to stop that from happening.
Absolutely beautiful stuff coming in from Pretender. I don't think a lot of my colleagues would have went into that one down 2 levels and been as confident as Pretender was able to play that one. Love to watch that.
Going back to my point, well, we might see a fight break out, but like Frank Esports, we knew mechanically they weren't too far behind in comparison to a lot of these PCS teams. It was really just the fact that because it was whipped up, this roster was whipped up so late, they had a whole lot of synergy issues. You weren't sure how they'd actually be able to play the game early on, and it feels like now week 3 it seems a little bit late, but you still have this full second round robin to try and redeem yourself and make your way back up the standings, and it's starting to look like they're set up for a really nice second half of the split.
That's really on you, Frank. Why didn't you build this team a little bit sooner? You could have bought in the spot a lot.
I'm a procrastinator. What can I tell you, Clement?
All right, so we're going to come back as we have an interesting split on the map. The Drake is about to come up, and it looks like Sem9 do not want to split these objectives. They are going straight for the Baron. It is getting spotted out, but as we see here, Pretender does not have a teleport. He's going to have to make it on foot. Sem9 are deciding to turn back around
stalling.
as Rebirth doesn't get the Hex Slash over the wall, is going to die. But that means, effectively, it was 1 kill for the Ocean Soul.
Yeah. That was clearly going to be the plan coming in from Frank Esports that entire time is, hey, make sure they aren't going to burst down the Baron buff, because yes, they haven't necessarily hit all their scaling points, but they still have a 2-item Jinx, and she does do a decent amount of damage at this point onto an objective like Baron, especially when you do have the 2.5 items on the Tryndamere. Oh, he's
just gonna find cast build. That was incredibly easy. Moves on to the second target. Gonna go underneath the tower with the Ocean Soul. Might even be thinking about staying here a little bit longer. And these trades are very one-sided for Frank. Sureline has to find something back here. The rest of his team is kind of falling apart, but he doesn't get the clean solo, as Holo absolutely does not honor duels, is just going to kill him. And it just looks
hey, what do you know? They're at Baron.
Yeah, that sequence of events for Sem9 did not pan out. They weren't that far behind before this play, but after 3 disastrous trades, they are very far away from even now.
Yeah, and with that Ocean Soul, it's almost impossible for the side of Sem9 to get back into this game because there's going to be so much healing. I would say even if Sem9 were the ones to secure themselves the Ocean Soul some way, somehow, like Frank Esports are still overloaded in burst damage, that it wouldn't have been a immediate knock on like, hey, we can now win this. But on the flip side, because it's a more slow and steady damage, elongated fights for the side of Sem9, this Ocean Soul is just so devastating.
It definitely is, and they do have that composition where we see a lot of 1-3-1 as Pretender is doing here. He can't be stopped. I don't think any combination of 2 members can take down Pretender at this point. He's 6-1-1, 700 gold bounty, 3 completed
Shadow
items
Flame
with Ocean Soul.
Yeah, the other thing is just having Shadow Flame and Sword Shoes. You don't have any resistances coming out if you are the side of Sem9. And the issue is, again, like, yes, you have some defensive stats built up, but defensive stats don't get you kills against Ocean Soul. So once more, I question the validity of something like an early Zonia's on the Orianna. You're really just playing too much for KDA at this point, and that's not what's going to get you back into the game.
Yeah, I think they definitely need a little bit more damage to have a decisive team fight and maybe get things back into their favor. As we do see Sem9 now venturing forward onto the map, at least trying to catch out Frank Esports, get some proactive plays going. But Frank, I don't think they're going to let this opportunity go. In comes Kurt. Nautilus ult goes down into the back line. Polo gets decimating smash onto Caspiel. Caspiel is surviving a long time, and they might be able to turn this one around. Clayx already down, though. Aphelios with the two-man kill on the Moonlight Vigil, and only Sherman is left alive. He goes as well. Not a perfect ace, but close enough for Frank Esports. They only lose Rebirth, and they are marching forward towards the victory.
A fairly clean ace. It's not perfect, of course, as they did drop one, but 28 minutes into the game, you have Cannon and Wave coming in. This should be enough to go ahead and finish this game. So Frank Esports, they'll move themselves up to 4 wins and really pole position for the bottom half of the standings.
Yeah, they are gaining on like the top 6. This will break their lose streak as well, so good signs from Frank. In the meantime, Sem9, this has been their first round robin, and they have to live with a 0-win first half of the split. Hopefully they will find better luck and better momentum in the second half. You know, this game was odd because I felt like Sem9 actually had a pretty decent advantage in the early phases of the game. We're gonna have to mention that a little bit later as we take a look at the last engage.
Yeah, and while it looked good because of how long Caspiel was able to stall out the fight, but look at the back, like Clayx, he's instantly dead. That's 90% of their damage because this Orianna just doesn't do damage with the Zhonya's. Again, like, he went for Zhonya second. He's going to be very safe, but safe isn't going to cut it if you need that one fight. If you're ahead and you're trying to protect the lead, that's when Zhonya's makes a lot more sense. But they're so far behind, like, you need to provide a secondary threat besides your Jinx, because if your Jinx dies, that's exactly what happens.
We have seen a lot of players in this position just kind of stop at the stopwatch and try to build into just finish off the Void Staff to make sure they have enough oomph in that situation. I just want to ask you, where do you think this game really went awry for Sem9? They were actually pretty decent in the early game. We saw Caspiel was able to herd people around the map with that kind of Orianna combo, but then in kind of a split second, it just seemed like completely gone from their hands.
Yeah, it looked really good for Sem9, right? You get a bunch of kills onto your Tryndamere, your Orianna isn't that far behind, your bot lane's doing, you know, they're surviving, but the issue really stemmed from the fact that once Pretender got going on the Akali pick, there wasn't any tools to stop the Akali from deterring the Akali from getting onto that backline, because Caspiel was always put in a position where he had to be the frontline champion, and the Braum wasn't doing enough work. As I felt like the Braum pick ended up playing more for his Xin rather than his backline.
Yeah, we didn't get that sort of defensive posturing a lot of the times because Pretender was just so good at finding flank angles that Braum just didn't seem to matter here. It's a very interesting game. You know, Sem9 definitely held their own in the early game, but mid-game, Frank came to play. Frank really had all of the positioning down, the side lane split pushing down, and I'm so excited for Pretender going into the second half of the season here. You know, I think the first half was very, very quiet. We saw Victor and Veigar, which honestly not a lot of players are playing. And then he swaps over to this new assassin side that we saw this game, which maybe it's only my personal appetite, but I kind of like it.
I think that's your play-by-play speaking.
It is. It definitely is. Like, he's been great on the mages, but I like it when he's playing a 1-3-1 and he has a little bit more agency. I feel like he was too chained to Eminem in the kind of like the previous style, where Frank was playing like the slowest game time and just trying to protect your AD carry. We have seen from this game at least that they can play a few more styles.
Yeah, I think part of that is due to they probably didn't figure out their communication structure. So transitioning out of some of these compositions or trying to figure out how to move around the map is just a lot simpler when you can just go, okay, we just scale up and then we'll find that one fight. Hopefully we win it. And then we can just go to Baron and kind of end the game from there. But it didn't really pan out, unfortunately. But I think they figured out how they want to play the game now, and they have a flow going. And you can kind of see that in this particular game. Yes, it was against M9, probably not exactly the most macro-oriented team to put you on the back foot, but it's still progress nonetheless. And we need to see more of this when we go into the second half.
Yeah, for sure. We're just waiting for the damage numbers to come up and the MVPs to go through. There's a lot of good candidates. I feel like Pretender is definitely going to be the easy one. I just want to show some love to Rebirth because those team fights were really nasty. Like flash over the wall, instantly getting Pretender the kill, and just using the Nautilus ult to start off the chain events of the last team fight were pretty beautiful. You can see that maybe he is here to stay.
Yeah, and we can sort of see why a lot of these teams are picking this Nautilus now, because unlike a Leona, you bring the target closer to you. Unlike a Thresh, you are going to be a little bit more durable when you look for these initiations as well. So it's kind of a middle ground between Leona and Thresh, and at the same time, if the other team is really grouped up, you're going to get these nice multi-man ultimates with your ult.
Oh, that ultimate that he got the death charge on the third Drake, that was chef kiss. I think he got a 4-man death charge with that, and that basically broke all the momentum Sem9 had, forced them up into a ramp, and gave them a free Drake, the most critical Drake of the game. So yeah, I really like what Rebirth has been showing from us, and he's definitely kind of the highlight player coming out from Frank. I feel like K2, he was very impressive on an AD carry perspective. I'm not sure if the swap back to support has kind of caught him flat-footed, but so far I do see Rebirth continuing to get this starting role on Frank Esports, as we get to take a look at some of these damage numbers here. Holo doing great on this tank. Caspiel doing a lot of damage on that Zin's out for his team. Quite surprising that he's able to get that much damage out. And in the meantime, Pretender and Eminem still able to hold down the fort for Frank, as we have the MVP. No surprises, going over to that Akali.
Pretender on this Akali was just definitely not fake. He was absolutely not fake, because he really went to town, almost pulling a 30% damage share from an assassin standpoint is pretty nuts, because of course you are more single target oriented. You're trying to finish off one target at a time, whereas AD carries, sometimes they just output millions of damage because they're hitting multiple targets with either AoE strikes or, or Runans, I suppose, would be the other option. But you tend to see larger damage shares from control mages as well, because of that AoE aspect as well.
Great 5v4 that Pretender was able to impose on the enemy team, always getting someone right before any of the games there. And that's going to be the first round for some of these teams here, but don't go anywhere, as we're going to come back with Impunity versus Hurricane Gaming to close out the week.